Kia ora tātou katoa. Our service today is a mix of carols and poems, and this is a little reflection that I wanted to add in. William Bosch tells a story of a 12-year-old boy, Bob, and a 95-year-old woman, Mrs. Hildebrand. Bob did little chores to help her, and she enriched his heart with stories. One Christmas, Bob became aware that he was the only person she ever really saw. When Mrs. Hildebrand came to pay him that day for the chores he'd done, he refused. But she insisted, saying, "What more important thing could I use this money for, if not to give it to a friend at Christmas?" When Bob left that day, he decided to go past the general store on the way home. Instead of buying a treat for himself, as he usually did, he found a Christmas card that he thought Mrs. Hildebrand would like. He bought it, wrote in it, and then he walked back to Mrs. Hildebrand's place and gave it to her. It wasn't too long after that Christmas that Mrs. Hildebrand died. What struck me about this little story from William Bosch was both its goodness and its ordinariness. Both Bob and Mrs. Hildebrand are good to each other and good for each other. Bob did chores for her, like many of us did as children for elderly relatives or neighbours. But Bob wasn't paid to listen to her stories. In other words, their relationship was more than a work-for-pay transaction. It was, as Mrs. Hildebrand said, about friendship. And Bob's purchase of a Christmas card proved that. They liked each other. The story is also very ordinary. It's about people helping each other. Kindness extended and reciprocated. One person towards the start of their independent life, and the other coming towards the end of it. The word angel is a Greek word. It means messenger. A messenger, certainly in the Bible, is said to come from God. But that doesn't mean that angels need to have wings, or appear suddenly out of thin air, or have supernatural powers like a Hollywood version would give them. An angel could be a 12-year-old boy or a 95-year-old woman. There are 3 sightings, so to speak, of angels in the 2 birth narratives we have about Jesus. In Matthew's account, the messenger appears in a dream to help Joseph get his head and get his heart around the fact that his fiancée, Mary, is pregnant, and not by him. Joseph is about to do the merciful and patriarchal appropriate thing, dismiss her quietly, is what the text says. When the dream makes him think again. That's what angels do. They make us think again. And what did this messenger look like? Who were the people in Joseph's life, living or now dead, who helped him rethink things? Did he have a great-grandmother who encouraged him to defy convention and follow his heart? Or was it his father, or an old man down the street? Was it an old woman that walked into his life, a neighbour, like a Mrs. Hildebrand? Then in Luke's account, Mary is visited by an angel with a gender-neutral, non-binary name, Gabriel. This messenger has a backstory, appearing in the books of Daniel and Enoch, said to be the guardian angel of Israel. Of course, the naming of this angel says more about the author Luke's theology and angelology, yes, there is such a thing as angelology, than Mary's. For Mary, this messenger, not unlike the one in Joseph's dream, came to help her get her head and her heart around a very difficult circumstance, namely an illegitimate pregnancy. Illegitimate as in not married, and she doesn't know who the father is. I can imagine Mary being distraught about the implications. I can imagine her being distraught about telling her parents, Joseph. I can imagine Mary being confused, unsure, and feeling alone. What did this messenger look like? No one knew what a Gabriel was meant to look like. Was the messenger an adult? Someone she would intuitively trust? Or maybe the messenger looked like a 12-year-old child, someone who would say something completely outlandish, off the planet. Maybe the messenger looked familiar, maybe unfamiliar. And then lastly, there was that angel on the hillside with the shepherds. Remember, shepherds were not only teenagers, but renowned for their shifty, as in shifting stolen property, ways. This messenger came not to comfort, not to help these teenagers get their heads and hearts around things, but this angel came to disrupt. The angel came to alarm them. She, it not only told them that a baby was about to be born in a very barn-like circumstance, but that this Jewish baby, born in poverty, would inherit all the titles that were associated with the great Roman god Caesar Augustus. This messenger gave the shepherds a set of alternate facts about an alternate way of seeing the world and an alternate God. As I said, this was a very disruptive and alarming angel. And the angel concluded his mihi with a waiata, as you do, and the heavenly host joined in. What did this messenger with the alternate way of seeing the known world of seeing God look like? What culture was she? What was the color of his skin? Did she look like a first-century police officer? Or did he look like a first-century Fagin, as in Dickens' famous fence? Who would these shepherds have listened to? I pose these questions to ask, who does our heart really listen to? When we are stuck in difficult circumstances like a Joseph or a Mary, what does a messenger, one who doesn't get us out of trouble, but helps us to understand it and get through it, what does such a messenger look like? When we are disrupted, discombobulated, alarmed by a completely different way of understanding what's going on in the world, what does that harbinger, that messenger, look like? Is it a pale-faced, white-winged, long-robed messenger, a semi-divine personage outside of our experience, as the world of European art has given us? Or is it something altogether different? Someone very familiar. Someone who could be a neighbor. Someone like a 12-year-old boy or a 95-year-old woman. Blessings to you this week.